let's get cracking. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by Regular Dude and part 2 of the Academy 1/72 scale JU87G1 Stuka tank buster. In this episode, we begin construction on the JU87. So, real quick, I just want to say that at the end there will be a link to the introduction video for this build. So if you want to see the contents of the box and my plan for the kit, go ahead and click on that at the end of this video and you can check that out. Now in this build, if you watch my channel much, let me explain a few things in the way I do builds on video. It doesn't always make the videos any shorter, but it definitely doesn't make them any longer. What I do is, if there are, I'll demonstrate how I cut and clean parts in like the first bit of a given video to demonstrate how I do it, and then unless something special comes up, I'll do the rest of that type of stuff off camera and just do the assembly steps only. Normally I don't show spraying or airbrushing of parts, just due to the location of my paint booth / extractor and the time it takes to do it. However, I think in this particular video I will do that, but what I will do is it will probably be more of a time-lapse thing, so it's not taking a long time to spray something. That way you can kind of at least see what I'm doing. So I'll be moving the camera to a different, I'll have a different camera angle, and it will be a time lapse, and I'll probably put some background music just so it's not completely boring. But that is the plan for the airbrushing and stuff like that. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get ready to start working on this kit, putting some parts together. So starting with step 1, I need to cut off all these parts, which we have B3, B4, B5, B6, B7, B10, B12, and A6. So here is what I'm going to do. Let's get the B sprue, and let's start with the cockpit floor. So taking my, and I'll explain what tools I'm using and why I'm using them along the way. Again, I do this in every video. For those of you who watch my videos, you know I do this. For those of you that might be new, viewing my videos for the first time, I like to do this for the beginners so people know what I'm doing and why. So first thing I'm going to do is cut this off, and I'm using my, it's a new cutter. My old cutter, my Tamiya cutter, starting to get somewhat worn, and there's even a notch in the bottom and a bend. Don't know how that happened, so I'm relegating that to more rough duty stuff. But for fine cutting, I'm using this God hand cutter. Looks like it's PN 120, and the reason I use a cutter like this is because they cut ultra fine, which makes cleanup a lot easier. So for example, I might do it one of two ways, depending on the part. Sometimes I'll cut them away from the part, closer to the large part of the sprue gate. Sometimes I'll cut it right up against. In this case, I'm going to cut it right up against. So just put it right there and cut it, and it makes a nice clean cut, so there's less to have to worry about sanding. So cut this one the same way, like that. It just leaves very little material, and it doesn't stress the plastic out because it's so sharp. So we got that. We've got B12, which is this seat. I'm going to cut that one a little bit away from the part, so there's a bit of sprue gate left on there, so I can show you how I clean that up. Then we have B3, which is this bulkhead or whatever you want to call it, that is that separates the pilot from the radio operator or navigator or combo, whatever he is. We have B5, which is the actual radio set, I believe. I'm going to cut that right up against, like that. And like that. Then we have B9, which is right here, which is the radio operator seat. I'm going to cut that away from the part just because it's kind of fine. I don't want to risk cutting a chunk out of it. And then we have B4 and B7. So B4 here and B7 here. And then we have B10, which is this control stick. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut this one before I cut this one. And I'm going to cut it away from the part, like that. And I'll cut this one right here, like that. So now I've got all those cut off, I can start cleaning them up. So for these parts that I cut the sprue gate away from the part, I'll just come back and butt it right up against the surface and clip it off. Gives a nice clean cut. Same here, like that. Gonna do the same thing here. And this one I have to be careful with, but again, by using a nice fine sharp cutter, you can cut that and not worry about breaking the part. Same here. Now, just as a note, I don't know if you can see it here, but on this side of the sprue gate where it attaches to this tab right here, this tab stays in place because that fits into a part of the cockpit floor. So as you can see, this is the same level all the way across. Generally, on the opposite side, it will be not the same level, if that makes any sense. So it gives you a good point to know where to cut. You just butt it right up against that. Not worry about cutting too far into the part. Same here. See, this is the same level here, not here. So you can just butt it right up against there and cut it, and boom. And that cuts it so well, there's gonna be very little sanding cleanup. On a part like this that's kind of angled, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to angle it so it maintains the, be less cleanup, and it's cut on the same angle as this part here. So that's pretty much the same thing for all of these. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, and then we'll come back and take a sander to it. Okay, now with all of them cut apart, I'm going to get my sanding stick, and where I cut it here, I'm using a 400 grit stick on this in this case, so I don't have to take off a lot of material, and just get that sanded smooth there. Then there was one here, same thing, sand it smooth. So that one's ready to go. This one here, there's one on the bottom. Sand that, and then there's one on the top. That's one I really got to focus on because that part is visible. Sand that smooth so it looks good. Now on the side you can see here some mold seam lines. Now in this particular case, it's not really necessary to clean those off because it's going to be within the cockpit and there's no way humanly possible you can see it. But I'm going to show you how I clean it anyway. I usually take my knife. Now for some stuff I use one of these. Thanks Lloyd. One of my friends across the water sent me a scalpel and some blades. Some larger blades. I have some smaller blades, but the bigger blades work better for some things. But I just use a flat blade and I just scrape it like this till the mold seam line is gone. Now they can also be sanded, but for me, I prefer not to sand stuff like this because I'm not real precise with it, and I could round the part off. Okay, I just don't have the skills, whereas this way it keeps it nice and flat. So that's how I clean those up. Right. On a part like this where there's a sprue gate in the top, I'll use a sander and sand it with the curve like this. Not like this, because I risk, you know, flattening it out, and I really don't want to do that. So I kind of go around it like this. Get that sprue gate off. So that takes care of that. Now we have some ejector pin marks here, and I need to determine if those need to be removed. And I don't think they do, because this part goes here and this radio contraption goes here in front of it. So it's not necessary to clean it up. Now there's one exposed, because this kind of fits like this. It'll be up against it like that. So there's one here that is exposed. So that one does need to be cleaned up. Not that it'll be seen, but it's always best to err on the side of caution and fill stuff like that in. So, excuse me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, how am I going to do this? I could just sand it down. You know what? I might be able to trim that down. So that's where the scalpel comes in handy with that curved blade. Very sharp, so you have to be very careful. All right, so that's that. Now let me take a little bit of a sanding stick here and see if I can sand that smooth. Now this is just a really thin sanding stick. That's with the smoothest, or the finest grit that I have on these little small sanding sticks, because it'll fit in here in between this raised part and this detail here. And that looks like it's going to be enough. I won't have to fill that. Again, it's not even going to be seen once see, these curved blades come in handy because you can scrape this stuff smooth without it leaving gouges. The shallow curve will kind of help remove that thusly. Then take the old sander here and finish it off like that. Okay, so that part's ready to go. So I'm going to clean the rest of these off camera, and then we'll come back and start gluing stuff together. Okay, so this seat has a ridge along the edge here that's going to have to be sanded. So I'm going to use this smaller sander to do this. Get rid of that mold seam line and that little bit of sprue gate that's left. And I'm going to try my large sander, see if I can get it with that. Yeah, it's better. Again, this is stuff that you're not even going to see down inside of that cockpit, but you know, you can take a shortcut and not do it, and I do that frequently, but it's a good habit to get into, and it's also something good for me to do if I'm going to be demonstrating this to potential beginning modelers. sanding that edge, getting rid of that lip, and then using the edge of the blade to remove any fuzziness of plastic. All right, all the parts are cleaned up, so now we can start gluing stuff together. I did forget one part though, and that is A6, and that is the machine gun in the back of the cockpit. So let's cut that off. Like that. And you have to watch for things like this. So like right here, this is a bit of, there's an ejector pin mark that would be right there to help push it out. That needs to come off. Now some instructions will show you to remove that. In this case, it doesn't. So it's just something to watch for. It all looks pretty clean. All right, so that is ready to go. All right, so I'm ready to start gluing this stuff together. So for my cement, I'm using Tamiya extra thin cement, which is a very liquidy cement. Now I might use other stuff later, but for now this is what I'm using. So we'll just start at the front with the control stick, and it's got this rectangular peg that fits into this rectangular hole right there like that. Now what I like to do, well, here we go. So notice I put it in place and then I apply the cement. That is the way Tamiya extra thin is designed to work, or any of these really thin liquid cements. They're designed to through capillary action, when you have the two parts together and you touch the cement, it just wicks through all around the contact point. Same here, I can touch it right here and it's going to zip all the way around that right there. Okay, oftentimes you'll see people take this Tamiya extra thin or one of the equivalents of other brands and dab the cement on the part and then put it together. Now that will work, but you risk a not very strong bond because this stuff evaporates very quickly. So in a case where you kind of need to do that, what you can do is like this. Especially if it's a place where it's kind of hard to reach. You can either use a different type of cement or you can do this. Okay, it's right around this little block on the bottom of this seat. It's going to fit on top of that rail. So what I do is I'll put a little bit of cement on either side in this case and put it in place. And then using, you know, in this case tweezers, just make sure it's pushed into place. Now that part may stick there okay, all right, but I don't like to take that chance. So I also need to make sure this is going to fit properly. Looks like it does. This part is supposed to be vertical, so this time I want to make sure that it's looking right. Okay, that looks good. What I like to do is once I've done that, then I take to be extra thin and touch it there and there in this case, and it'll wick along that part, ensuring that there's a nice firm really weld the parts together. Okay, so that's how you do it. So next, this part's going to go here. Whoops. Again, there's a little rectangular bit that fits in a rectangular hole. See, I've got it in place there. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to touch the cement to the part. Make sure it's pressed firmly in place. And I'm ready to go to the next part, which is this radio thing. Again, it just fits right in there like that. There and there. Make sure it is pressed firmly into place. You'll have to excuse my voice too, it's kind of froggy, got a cold. Just like that. Then we're ready for B5. No, that was B5, sorry, B9. Benign. Huh. And just make sure you have it going in the right direction. There's like a little short back right there, and there's a squarish hole and a squarish bit on the end of the seat post there. Don't launch the part across the room. So that, oh my goodness, holy smokes, I'm having a hard time gripping this, folks. There we go. So make sure that's vertical. Make sure it's a 90-degree angle to the floor. Same thing, a little bit of cement there. And if you so desire, you can put cement underneath here like this on these parts. Thusly. All right, so then we've got this part here. Then we have another slot and a little tab. Now in this case, this part faces towards the seat. So drop that into place there. It's got a nice large base, so you know, guaranteed to get it nice and square with the floor. Again, just put the cement on there. Let it wick around and do its thing. Make sure it's pressed in really well. Then we can put this part in. Now this part here, this little tab fits into that hole there. Now in the illustration on the instructions, it shows that the long part of that faces toward the seat or toward the front of the aircraft. So that's the way we're going to put in place. I'm going to get some tweezers for this so you can see what I'm doing. Just put it in place like that, maybe. There's a molding seam line there that needs to be buzzed off so it'll fit. Let's see if that's enough. is not cooperating. There's a ring molded in around there, and that is stopping it from going into place. So it doesn't even show it in the instructions. So what I'm going to do here, I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this off flat like that. So hopefully it will fit. Not quite. So I'm going to have to sand this off a little bit more. Matter of fact, I'm just going to trim it with a knife. Let's see how that fits. Still not quite. There we go. Splendid. Okay, so we'll put some like that. Make sure that's lined up properly. I'm gonna let that set up for a few seconds before I try and glue the machine gun on. All right, for this, I don't want to glue quite so quickly, so I'm going to be using a thicker glue. It's liquid cement, but it's thicker. I think this is the Model Master liquid cement for plastic models. I think it's the equivalent of Revell Contacta, like you'd see in our European friends use. Maybe others, but that's where I mostly see it. I'm gonna add a little bit some more cement right here because I don't want that thing wobbling around. But I'm gonna use this because it's a little slower drying, and I can put it on here and have it work correctly because I want to have some working time here to make sure this is lined up. So we got that. Now let's take this tweezers, and there's a little hole that goes on a pin right here, just like that. So I get in place, and then I'll maneuver it all up where it's supposed to be, like that. It's not cooperating, folks. So I have to do a little trim job here on a little part that's underneath. Now this is where you got to be careful. I should have looked at this closer. The illustration and the instructions do not match the shape of that part. It should be turned the other way. But now that it's glued in place, I'm committed. So I'm going to have to modify this piece a little bit. There we go. So now let's try and stick it on there. Okay, that looks lined up pretty well. So in order to ensure a nice solid bond, I'm now going to add some Tamiya Extra Thin to it. Like that. Okay, so now I need to let that dry, and that I'll set aside. That finishes step 1. Next up, I'm going to get, for step 2, I'm going to cut these 2 fuselage halves off and get those cleaned up and test fit the cockpit. So again, I'm going to take the cutter, and this one I'm going to cut away because I want to do this work off of the sprue. Parts like this can be damaged a little bit easier. So that, like that. So then, using my cutter, I'm going to put it like this. Whoops, I didn't get it quite flush enough. Cut that off like that. And that almost eliminates that sprue gate almost completely. It's a nice thing about cutters like this. Okay, those are ready to go. So I'm not going to worry about sanding them or anything like that because, you know, I'm going to have to do that after the parts are together. So I'm going to test fit this here. Now, the way this fits is these corners, the front and back corners, fit in these little grooves, these little U-shaped locating points. So I'm going to put that there, and whoops, oh man, that there, and that there. And then take this other part here. Now keep in mind, I mean, only recently have I really started delving into 1/72nd scale aircraft. I'm usually 1/48 and occasionally 1/32nd scale. So I kind of bumble around with this stuff a little bit at times because, you know, big hands, big fingers, little small parts. Okay, that all fits really good, which will make cleanup really easy. And I'll show you a trick that I use for gluing fuselage halves together that kind of helps with lining things up. But that all looks good. So what I'm gonna do here, before I glue these together, I need to paint some stuff. So what I'm going to be using to paint the insides of this. Now, let me talk real quick about ejector pin marks. Modern kits do a really good job about making sure the ejector pin marks are in a spot that is not visible. Now, again, this is really small. You probably wouldn't see it anyway, but these will fit really nice. Fit together without being able to see those, so you don't even have to mess with cleaning them up. So I'm going to get my stuff ready here, and we'll be using the MRP RLM 66 to spray the inside of this. Now, being the interior, I'm not going to worry about priming this for a number of reasons. Number one, I'm using lacquer-based acrylics, which are going to bite into the plastic better. and there's not going to be a lot of handling on the inside, so there's not really any need to do that. So I'm just double checking this. It all fits together nicely, so we'll be good to go. So all right, so I'm gonna get the camera, get it shifted around the other direction so we can see what's going on with the paint. Okay, I got everything set up here, so I'm ready to go. I've got my parts, my booth, cleaner, little dropper for the paint. I'm using, as I said, MRP RLM 66, Schwarzgrau, MRP 059. I'm going to be using my, it's a trigger pull double action TRN1 Neo for Iwata. The reason I'm using this, for those of you who haven't watched my channel before maybe, a regular type double action, I just can't maintain fine enough control for doing close-up work, for like camouflage and stuff like that, so I just switched to this. You pull it back, that's air blowing, and you feel it stop, kind of like a two-stage trigger on a rifle. And then you pull it back further, and it begins to spray the paint. You can control how much the trigger goes back with this right here, so it'll only go back so far, and you don't have to worry about pulling it too far and giving a big old splat of paint. So I'm gonna get the paint in here, get it ready to go. I'll put it on time lapse, that way you're not having to listen to this hideous fan sound, and you can just see what's going on. All right. Okay, we're back to more construction. So, you know, one thing I got to say about this MRP paint is I'm digging it. I really like the way it works. Okay, so since this is all going to be closed up and everything, I'm not going to do a whole lot of like detail painting or anything like that. What I am going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of dry brushing with a gray of some kind, just to kind of make some of the detail just maybe pop a little bit, for lack of a better term. So let me grab, okay, what I'm using here is Tamiya XF20. I'd rather use Vallejo just because it's already really thick, but I don't have a color appropriate, so I'm going to use this. And I've used a modified brush here where I've cut the bristles off, got the paint on there, rubbed most of it off, and then I'm just going to hit it like this, and it's just going to, if I can do it gently enough, it'll just hit the edges and the highlights. Just give it a little bit more relief. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but it's not my first choice for brushes or anything, but sometimes you just gotta make do. It's almost like scrubbing the paint on. So that'll just kind of give it a little bit more. Hopefully you can see in the video here what I'm trying to accomplish. Can't, well, I'm sorry. I feel bad. Not really. again, I would do this. This would be a totally different series of steps on this cockpit if it were going to be open, but since it's not, this is what I'm doing just to give it a little bit of relief here, because that stuff down inside there, I'm telling you, it's not going to be visible, especially with the cockpit closed up. But if for nothing else, it's a good exercise. See, it's bringing out that cross hatching in that seat a little bit. If I can do this without breaking the gun off. Yeah, see, that's working. The radio, same thing. Just gonna highlight the features just so it doesn't look quite so flat in there. This little battery box or whatever this is in the bottom. Yeah, so it's doing what I want. Okay, it's, you know, somewhat, well, some people call it an archaic technique, but it can still be effective. Just because it's an old technique doesn't mean it's not a good technique. All right, so that'll do it. That's good enough for what I'm trying to accomplish here. So let me get this brush cleaned up and then we'll come back and assemble this stuff. All right, got my, to me, extra thin, my two halves of the fuselage. So let us glue it together. Put that there. Cement there. Cement there. And cement there. Also put some here and there. Okay, so we got that put in, and you may be wondering, why haven't you glued the fuselage? Well, I'll show you why here in a second. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the front here. And that'll kind of hold it together. So I let it kind of flex open a little bit. And I just touch the cement on there, let it run through the seam, and then squish it together like thusly. Nice thing about to me extra thin is it sets up really quick. Okay, so next I'm gonna let that sit up just for a second before I monkey around with anything else. All right, next I'm gonna work on this part here up to the tail, and a little bit of plastic right there. Okay, so I like to work my way around. That way I can focus just on one area, and I can use clamps to force the plastic. So like right here, there's just an ever so tiny step, all right? And I can counteract that with a clamp, so it'll reduce the amount of sanding I have to do. So first I'll there like that. Push that all together. Make sure there's cement inside of that. Okay, so for right there, I'm going to use one of these clamps. Like that. Then right here, I'm going to use one of these clamps. Because the step is on this side, I'm going to clamp it at an angle like this. To kind of counteract that a little bit. That way I won't have such a big step to have to sand and mess with. Okay, now I'm just going to let that set up for a bit, and then I'll move my way down here and across the bottom. All right, now that that's had time to dry, I can move on. Whoops, I can move on to the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing. So first, let's put some cement there. There. There we go. Now notice with this, if you're not familiar with this type of cement, I'm sure most of you are. For those who aren't, as you can see, when I squeeze it, get a little bit bubbling out. Now the reason it does that is because it's melting the plastic together, and that is a good thing because it almost acts as a filler. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so that pretty much ends step number 2. So let's move on to step 3. So step 3 is the nose section and the instrument panel. So what I need to do is I need to paint the instrument panel the same color that I painted the inside of that, the RLM 66. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to paint the inside of part A8 because that uses the same color. So I'm going to do that at the same time, and that really should finish up with that color. Normally I like to try and paint it, you know, a given color all at once. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut those 2 parts off and get those ready for paint. So we need part B11, which is the instrument panel. And for this, to make it easier to paint, I am going to first I'll cut right there. Then use my other cutter. I'm going to cut right here. That way I can put this in one of these to hold it while I paint it. So I'll put that aside there, and then what was that other part I needed? A8. Actually, that one I can just leave on here to spray. So I'm going to leave that. Excuse me. Clean this one up here. Like that. And then on the side right here, there's a mold seam line, so I'm going to scrape that smooth, like thusly. And right there, like that. Okay, so we got that. Now I'm not even really sure I need to paint this because, well, this part up here needs to be painted. So I'll probably just go ahead and paint it. You know, there's a decal that's going to go on top of it, but I'm going to go ahead and paint it that way. I mean, since I'm going to have the paint out already. So let me go ahead and get my, now since you saw how I sprayed the inside of this, I'm not going to move my camera to do these. I'm just going to do these real quick and then come back. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to put this decal on here, which oddly enough, it doesn't tell me to do on the instructions. It's kind of weird. But anyway, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this here decal or decal or decal, and I'm going to cut it out. Then I'm going to dip it in my water here, my little water jar. Set it right here. Let it soften up and release from the backing paper. While it's doing that, I'll get my decal solutions here. Set and sol, and my set and sol brushes. And let's check this. Not quite ready yet. Okay, it's loose from the backing now. So what I'm going to do is put some micro set on here. Put that little decal in place. Slide it down a little bit because it's a little high. And then using a cotton swab, kind of push it down in place. It doesn't seem to be sticking very well, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so now I'm going to take some micro sol and put on there, and hopefully it'll soften it up. get it to settle in good. Okay, it's all down into place now, so let's see what this does. All right, so I'm going to set that aside, see what happens. Okay, while that is drying, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these parts out and get those glued together. Now, it's calling for metallic gray for the exhaust and flat black for that there. I'm not even going to worry about painting those right now. I'll paint those later. So what I need is parts B1, 2, 8, and A3 and 4. So let's get those out. Get those cleaned up just like I cleaned up all the rest of the parts. All right, so this part here goes here. And that's quite a snug fit, so that's kind of nice. And then this one here goes here. Okay, come on now. Like that. Good grief. Okay, so this nose is going to take a little bit of work because it's slightly out of alignment. It'll probably be okay. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Let's see, I will start with the top. There. Like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this. I'm going to kind of clamp it at an angle from the side like that. And let that dry before I try and glue the bottom. Okay, and while that is drying, I'm going to cut off these prop parts. Oh, yeah, I'm not going to do the exhaust just yet. I'm going to cut off these prop parts and see how they fit together. So I need a 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we got 9, 10, 11, and 12. Get those all cleaned up. Okay, now I can do the bottom here of this front portion. get some glue there. Put some glue on the inside like that. Like that. And let that dry. So this here, I need to do a little bit of work on the edges of the wing of the prop blades, because as you can see here, there's it's either misalignment of the mold or it's flash. So I'm just going to take this soft sponge type sanding stick try and get it cleaned up, go all the way around like this, and I'll do it on both sides of the blades. Okay, all those parts are all cleaned up. This spinner part, I don't think I'm going to use that because it's not necessary unless you want to be able to spin the propeller, which I don't. So I will be just putting this together like this. So let me see if this is dry. Let's see how this fits on here. Oops. That, and that. I guess I could use it if I wanted to. So I can glue all those pieces separately because I'm probably going to be painting this stuff off of here since I have to do the tip of the spinner yellow. It'd just be easier to mask it and paint it with it, you know, on here. So I think all those parts are going to get painted separately. So I'm going to put those aside in my parts holding container. Keep them from getting lost. Okay, now, so that takes care of this. Now I can glue. I'm not going to glue those on until I get these parts sanded down smooth. And I may not do that until after I've glued it onto the aircraft thusly. Okay, so let's see here. So the next thing I need to do is I need to glue this instrument panel onto this upper cowling part here, but I need to make sure this is all firmly affixed. So I think what I'm going to do, I think this is going to take some kind of harsh. That's not really harsh, it just works. Put some Walters Solvaset on here, because that stuff generally works really good for snuggling stuff down. And also once all this dries and settles in, I'm going to try and trim that residual decal film off. So I think while that stuff is, well, this really needs to cure good before I can start sanding and scraping on it, because the plastic is still a little bit soft. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to set this aside. And I think what I'll do, let me see if this is ready for some cleanup. Okay, I'm going to use a scraper on here first. Yeah, it seems like it's pretty good. Okay, now I want to take a thin sanding stick here. See, it's higher on this side here compared to that, so I need to get that blended together. Now, the nice thing, one of the things that you can do, it's kind of a little trick, not really a trick, it's just something you can do, is as you sand, the parts become dull from the sanding process. So like right here, hopefully you can see this is dull here, but over on this side it's still shiny. That means you haven't got it down to the same level yet. So I just use a rocking motion to make sure that I don't get a flat spot, and then I just keep sanding that until that shiny spot disappears. See, that's pretty good. A little bit more right here. Not quite yet. Okay, so that's pretty good. So now I'm going to take this soft sander, try and buff out any of the scratches there might be. Just keep working at it. Like that. Then hit this up here. Make sure that's smooth. So that looks pretty good. I won't really be able to know for sure until I put primer on it. But once I do that, then we can determine if I need to do more. But that looks pretty good. So now what I can do is I can fix those panel lines across the top. And to do that, I'm going to use this scriber here. I can't remember the, oh, Scribe R, Scribe-R, RB Productions. It's a scriber, and it's got a really ultra fine point on there, and like some kind of a sawtooth edge there. So all I have to do, since I didn't sand it all the way down flat, all I have to do is just sharpen it up a little bit. Like that. So so it should be nice and fixed. So for right here, I can use this sawtooth edge thing to replace this on this really skinny spine-ish area here. That's a technical term, spine-ish area, I know, but try and keep it simple. And then one right there. And voila, should be good to go. Now this here, that is smooth. That white that you can see right along that edge there, that's just the stress from cutting the plastic. It is smooth, it feels like. Oh, there's a little bit of hang up there, so. And then hit it with this one again. Okay, I'm just gonna double check this. Then to clean the line up, just use a very small amount, to me extra thin, and it'll clean that, any dust or anything that's inside of that panel line that was just scribed. It'll clean that up really good. So I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom here, and we'll do it on camera since you've seen me do it already, and then we'll be ready to move on. Alright, well, all that current stuff is drying and setting up and whatever else it's going to do. I'm going to jump ahead and get part A8, which is that part that I sprayed the inside with the RLM 66, and I am going to show you how I'm going to glue the clear part that goes on there. How I'm going to glue that and keep it from getting messed up whenever I prime and paint. Clean this up first. There like that, and right there like that. Okay, so first I'm going to do a test fit on here. That looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the clear part, which is F8. Seems to be a little bit of flash going on. Whoops. Okay, on this part, there is a little tab or pin, whatever you want to call it, that goes in that side there. So that fits, should fit, just like the, wow, that fit in there really tight. I may not even have to glue it. Wow, that's pretty cool. I am going to glue it though. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to put a little tiny bit of glue right here I don't care if it glues the whole thing. I just want to kind of tack it into place. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is I need to mask this for paint. Now, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there is a ring molded with some rivet detail around all the edges. That's got to be painted like the rest of the plane without messing up that clear business. So what I'm going to use for that looks like about a 5mm circle. So what I'm using are these, and for the life of me I cannot remember the brand, but it's like a Tamiya masking tape type material, washi tape I think they call it, and it comes in a multi-pack in everywhere from 1mm in 0.2mm increments up to 6mm. So in this case I want to do 5mm. So it comes with this handy backing here. So the 5mm is right here. So I'm going to pop one of these off. We'll see if that's the right size. If it's not, then all I have to do is just get a little bit larger one until I get the size that I want. These things are extremely handy. Now I've actually cut masks this small before, circles, but it ain't fun. I think that might be a little small, so let's jump it up. Let's jump that up to, let's go 5.4. So that's going to be this row right here. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Looks like it's a little off center. No, that looks pretty good actually. All right, so there we go. Mask will not be a hindrance for the paint, but yeah, these are really handy for doing this kind of stuff. One thing I like to do, it's not absolutely necessary, but it's something I like to do, is wherever there is paint on a surface that needs to be glued, I like to scrape it off. Scrape the paint off. Personally, I think it just makes the paint adhere a little bit better. I don't always do it, but I do think it helps. Now, there's a lot of people that wouldn't even think about doing it, but I do. So let's put this in position. Whoops. In position here. Okay, so I'm going to glue this side first. For some reason it looks like it's a little bit crooked. So let me see what I need to do to fix that. That's getting a little bit better. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to glue this thing on here, and we shall hope for the best. Excuse me. Okay, so got that in place. Need to let that dry really good before I try and sand it or anything. So we'll set that aside. And still gotta wait for this decal. Well, the decal's settling in really good finally. So I'm gonna let that sit for a little bit, then we can come back and glue those parts together. Alright, so I'm gonna cut this part off here, which is A7. See if I can get that instrument panel glued in place. Get this cleaned up. Alright, so let's cut this off of there. Let's see how this fits in here. There's like a T-shaped bit there that fits right there. So I need to, as I say, I like to make sure there's no paint. I painted the inside edge of this. Not sure it'll be visible, but just in case. Holy smokes. It's kind of hard to hold in place. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little dot of this in here. So I can tack it in place, hopefully. Wow, that is, there we go. Good night. That was a harrowing ordeal. And then I'll take this, do that. Make sure it's pressed in there really good, like that. All right, man. Then we'll test fit this here. Looks pretty good. I need to get rid of a little bit of sprue gate right there. Let's check the others. Check the other side. Nope, that one's good. Man, my voice, folks, is just, well, of course, you guys are probably stoked, but my voice is really perishing. Okay, so I need to, before I glue that in place, I need to level that out. And I'm going to do that with this blade here, because it'll make it kind of concave. Okay, so now let's try it. Oh yeah, much better. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so that has got to make sure that that all needs to fit real smooth like that. So I think what I'm going to do though, I think I'm going to glue this in place first, because that'll help make sure it's lined up, I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape some of this off since it's pretty hefty. Pretty hefty seam we got going here. So I also need to get this seam right here so the prop will fit flush like it should. So let's get the base plate out and see how flush it is. Yeah, it looks pretty good. All right, so now, so just like on the other parts, I need to clean out this panel line here. And then repair the panel line right there. Like that. And then I need to clean all this up. So I'll do that off camera since you've seen how I do it, so as not to waste a lot of time. So I'll get this cleaned up, come back, and think about getting it attached to the front of the aircraft here. Okay, so now I can glue this nose section on. And there are tabs here and here that fit around that. So we got this going on. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to glue this thing on here. And then once I do that, I can glue this other piece up top. Now, something to take note of is there's natural panel lines right here. So one wants to be careful not to get too much cement in there to where it fills those panel lines in. If that makes sense. All right, so that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna let that dry for a few minutes, and then we'll get this part. Put it, well, actually, I'd probably just do it right now like this. Yep, that looks pretty good. So let me scrape this cement off of here, or this paint, I should say. Like that. And then this will go here like this. So what I want to really do is make sure that these railings on the side here line up with the sill right here. I want everything to fit properly while avoiding getting... Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to apply some cement here first. Get the front tacked in place, and then wiggle this around to where it's as even as possible. Okay, that looks good. So now put some there, and there. This side needs to be pushed down a little bit. All right, so that looks pretty good. Like that. So let's see. That's glued in place, that's glued in place. So basically, everything has been completed up to step 4 with the exception of the propeller and the exhaust, and those I'm going to do later. So I think with that I can call this video complete. So that ends part 2 of the Academy 1/72nd scale JU87G1 Stuka. We got steps 1 through 4 completed with the exceptions noted. So, as always, thanks for tuning in, and if you like this video, you might want to subscribe so you can see more of this build or some of my other builds. And yeah, tune in next time where we'll pick up with step number 5. So, as always, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and I will see you all later.